Hi, welcome to Life in the Family. My name is Bethany Henry, and I'm the Family Life Pastor here at Adoration Church. We've been in the middle of a series called Environments for Discipleship, and we did an intro just talking about why discipleship is necessary, how in the life of every believer, like we're called to be conformed to the image of Jesus and to walk in his ways, but then also how he commands us to go and make disciples of all nations, and how he gives us these spheres of influence to go and to make disciples. And that essential part, I think, of discipleship is we can try to do this. We can find someone and be like, hey, can I speak into your life? But there's these foundational things that I think I'm going to call them environments, because I think they're necessary for things to thrive, to live, to grow, to be healthy. And so we talked about last time, we called it viewpoint. We did a message on it yesterday called perspective. So kind of the same thing is recognizing that the story of my life is actually not my story, but that I'm a character in the story that God's telling of his redemptive work to all of creation. And he's invited and chosen us to get to be a part of that story, and just how beautiful that is and powerful, and how it frees us to not have to figure everything out, but to get to walk in what he has for us each day in obedience. Today, we're going to talk about identity is going to be the second environment. And identity you could unpack it, I think, forever. It's such a large scale thing where you could talk about the importance of seeing the Father correctly, right? Because if you don't see the Father correctly, it's hard to see yourself correctly if you don't believe true things about who God is. And then also seeing ourselves correctly of who he says we are, and that we're not the things that we do, but that there's a thing of, regardless of everything of who I am stops and ends, it doesn't change who he says I am. In his sight, this is what is the most true essence of who I am. So we could talk about that for just such a long time. But I think what we're going to concentrate on today is speaking forth identity. I believe this is one of the first assignments that God gave to Adam in the garden, as he brought the animals to him and told him to name them. And that word name has this concept of give identity to. I think about how we name our children, and it's not just putting a name on them of what we're going to call them. It's like an essence of who they are, and these names have meaning, and like we're speaking over them. I don't know if you've ever heard somebody like have a baby and they had this name in mind, but then they saw him and they're like, that's not who you are. So this idea of like God himself gave us this assignment to give identity to things. And a lot of it comes through our words. In the Bible, it says death and life are in the power of the tongue. And so to recognize like God created the whole world by like what he spoke forth. And he's made us in his likeness and his image. And so I just believe like our words are so powerful, the things that we are speaking forth. And so the first thing I just want to challenge us with is, what are we speaking forth, first of all, over ourselves? Because those things, like if they carry that same power to create and like give life to something, like what am I speaking out and allowing to be like released into the earth through my words? Not only over myself, but about the people that I come in contact with, whether that's my children or whether it's my coworkers or whether it's somebody that passes me on the interstate and cuts me off. Like what is in the power of my tongue that I'm speaking over them? And it doesn't mean that there's not hard things that we have to say sometimes. Like I'm going to relate this to kids because this is life in the family. And so even though I believe this like applies to everybody, I think family is a beautiful place where God allows us to walk these things out. So if my child does something wrong, sometimes I have to call out what the thing is that wasn't correct and just be like, I'm sorry, that was a lie. But instead of being like, you are such a liar, like I have told you to stop lying, and I go off on this thing and I'm speaking over them that they are a liar. I'm trying to remind them of their truest identity and be like, you're a child of the Most High God. And like he commands us to not lie. And when you're lying, you're not walking in who God says you are and how he commands you to live. And so instead of like speaking out in my words over them, like, like you're such a liar. I can't believe you did that. And like what that's giving the power to create, then I'm speaking out true things. That was a lie, but you are not a liar. We aren't going to do that. And so I also think of a lot of things with identity have to do with alignment. And so it's like, if I don't have correct thinking about myself, if I think like I can't do anything right, and that's the way I think of things, I'm going to see things through that like thing because it becomes part of my identity. And I see how everything I do, I can't do it right. And if I do something right, it surprises me and be like, well, I got lucky that time, because I have this thought about myself that's not true. And you can use that in all sorts of things, but we can also think that of other people. I think of people we work for or work with, or people that we come into contact with on a regular basis, maybe in friendship, and we develop these thoughts about people. And to be like, we start seeing them in a certain way. And so like, we have to have right thoughts. We have to ask God for, what are your thoughts? And like, what do you say over this person? What do you say over myself? What do you say over my children? So that we can have right thinking that causes us to have like alignment with like God's truth, and maybe not the truth of where they're at right now. Even though we can see it, we can be like, that's not actually the ultimate truth of who you are. Like, the ultimate truth is this. Like, this is what God says of you. And I think about like alignment. I also think of like discipline is a word, and we use discipline in a lot of different ways, but it's like, in essence, the same word as discipleship. At the front part of it is disciple. So disciples have to be people who are disciplined. And so I think of that like correct thinking and identity. Like, we actually have to be disciplined in it. So oftentimes we hear the word discipline, and I think, especially if you're a parent, or maybe you were disciplined a lot as a child. So when you hear that word, you might think of punishment, that if I do something wrong, I'm going to be disciplined. But I think of it often too of like the beautiful thing that discipline is it's like setting something in front of you of like, this is who and what I choose to be. So like, let's say you choose that you're like, the way that what I'm setting before myself is that I'm going to be healthier. I'm going to make better choices of what I eat, because what I see that I want to walk into is a person who is healthier and has lost weight and is able to do these things. And maybe that includes like some strength training, or I'm going to need to get walking so that I can have like the ability to be the person that I want to be out in front of me here. And so like, what's in the sight set before you is going to be my first question, as far as like for yourself. And becoming like Jesus, is Jesus actually the thing that you're trying to walk after? And is that like the goal in front of you? But it also should be the goal for like my kids, or like people that are in my life that I'm discipling. Like, is Jesus the goal, or am I trying to make them like me? Or am I trying to make them like the person I wish I was? I think that that's a really easy thing to do for our kids, right? Is that we're like, well, I walked through this and I wish it wasn't like that. So for them, I'm going to help them to have it better, instead of being like, actually, the goal is that they're conformed to the image of Jesus, not the idealistic version of myself that I wish was true. And so to just be like, what is the thing that's set before me and set in front of the people that I'm discipling? Like, what's the goal? And then to realize like, sometimes things get out of alignment. And so that's why we're going to go back to this word alignment and identity. And so let's go back to like being a healthy eater and being a healthy person. So I need to discipline myself and have like things that like kind of are like boundary lines, right? So if you think of it like this road type thing, these are like the like roadways. And I want to stay on this because this is the path to get to this thing in front of me. And I want to try to stay on the road and not get off into the ditch. So if it was healthy eating, I might say something like, okay, I want to avoid sugar. I don't think that that's going to be of any benefit to me. I want to avoid, let's say, eating after 8 p.m. because that's when I tend to not eat the healthiest things. I want to make sure I get in a walk every day, and maybe I'm going to try to lift weights 2 times a week. Okay, so like let's say I see this person set before me to be healthier. And those are kind of the things I'm setting as like, I think to get there, these things have to happen. And that's my current place. Right now, these are the next steps to take. So in walking those things, I've kind of made like, okay, here's how we start walking on this path. But then let's say I buy the most yummy flavor of ice cream that ever was, and it's in my freezer, and it's not wrong for me to have it. And I could have it once in a while and still be a healthy person. But I find that when that thing's in my freezer, I eat it every single day because it's yummy and it's hard to resist. And I want to do this thing instead of like, like I'm getting sidetracked. I'm starting to get off into this ditchy area where it's like, oh, that wasn't the steps on this road. And so there are natural consequences to things. And I will bring this back. Sorry, this isn't about being a healthier person, but I think it's such like a beautiful picture of like how we can all get off in our behaviors and start walking an identity that's not true. And so like, I might have to like have consequences for my actions. I might have to say, here's the truth. I can't handle the responsibility of having ice cream in my house. If I have it, I'm not at that place yet where I'm going to handle it rightly. So consequence, I cannot buy ice cream anymore. And it's a natural consequence. And then there's also just going to be natural consequences of like, I'm now over here and I'm going to have to walk myself back onto the path that I should be. And so I sidetracked myself for a time from this goal of where I'm walking. So there are those natural things. Okay, so let's take this back to alignment and let's do it in our own lives. And I'm going to start with doing it like in the lives of our kids. So I think a lot of the times, let's say my child has these behaviors. First of all, it can show me a lot of the things in myself that are out of alignment because sometimes it just can bring out irritation, all this, and be like, it brings out my fear of failure because I can't believe you're doing these things. And I'm frustrated now because I didn't think we were in this place. And instead of acting out of a place of being like, okay, I'm here to help you, to disciple you, to walk after Jesus, I find my own self off in the ditch on this side, not walking after Jesus because I have my own things that are coming out that he's so good to bring out, right? He uses every circumstance. He's at work in it all to, for our good. And so I think like, oh, I see my own shortcomings and how I handled the situation before my child. Okay, so like let's say that I ask them to put the laundry away. That never happens in my house, by the way. This was just, I'm just kidding. This happens all the time in my house that I ask a child to put their laundry away and it doesn't happen. Okay, so what I see is there's something that's out of alignment. And so I have to like think first. And for myself, I have to pause and stop because I can get frustrated by the behavior. But we talked about this right away with discipleship. It is not behavior modification. Like that is not the goal of it all. The goal is that I become in the image of Jesus. And there might be behaviors that aren't like Jesus that are out of alignment. But the goal is not that I just behave. The goal that is I'm like him. And so I think for my child, like I can be frustrated that they're just not behaving, but I have to like take a step back and just be like, what's out of alignment right now? And I can say like, oh, okay, in this case, I think the thing that's out of alignment is that we're struggling to obey the words that their mom is speaking. And so when I come to my child, I'm not just mad at them because they didn't put away the laundry and I've asked them 10,000 times to put away their laundry. Instead, I'm coming to them and just being like, hey, something's out of alignment here. I've asked you to do this and you haven't done it. And what that's showing me is that you don't honor me and you're not listening to my voice. And those things are important because God has commanded them. But I'm also trying to teach you to honor God. And I'm trying to teach you to listen to his voice. So I can't just let these things slide because they're off the path. This is in the ditch. This is not going to help you to like become like Jesus. And so I want to remind them of those truths and just be like, alignment would look like honoring my mom. And alignment would look like obeying her voice. And so there might be consequences, but the thing is like, like there's that verse, there is no fear in love because fear has to do with punishment. And so when I'm doing this from a place of love and I'm not fearing my own failure and I'm not fearing that they're going to turn out horrible. I'm in fact just like coming along the process of who God's making them to be and helping them get back in alignment. I can say something like, I see something that like there's so many other things that you would like to do, and you are choosing those things instead of the most important things right now. So you're choosing self and gratifying the desires of your own self instead of the things that are godly. And so what I'm sorry, like there is going to be no electronics, or you're not going to get to play with friends tomorrow. And instead, I want you to take a step back. This isn't meant to punish you. It's meant to align you. And like, I have to take away some of these privileges because the foundation isn't right yet. And I would love to let you be outside playing with your friends. But first, we're going to make sure things are in step. And so maybe there's like the natural consequence of those things, but the purpose isn't punishment. The purpose is to get us back into alignment with the true identity of who God has us for to be and what we're going after. And then after those things are in place and they remember who they are and be like, I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry I didn't honor your voice, versus just being mad that they don't get to play with their friends. So I'm watching for that alignment shift. And then when that alignment shift is back in place, then I can give them more responsibility of being like, okay, I trust you to use your electronic time after you've obeyed my voice. And like after you've like done the things that you know are right to do. And have been obedient and honoring. And you can handle the responsibility now of choosing when you go outside to play with friends and those things, because alignment is back in place. And so I think a lot of identity is like, we see how we're not yet who we want to be. But the truth is that like that is like who we're called to be, and that is what God is doing in our life. And so we want to speak the thing out that he's doing and glorify him, not the works of the enemy, and give power to those things. And so just reminding ourselves when we find ourselves out of alignment of like, what are we looking at? Like, what is the goal? And this might be in several areas, right? You know, like if you're working on eating healthy, I have to remind myself of the goal. But the goal in discipleship is to become like Jesus, to follow in his footsteps. And so I think so much of it just comes to alignment and watching those things where we're not walking yet. And the truth is there's so many, right? Like I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to get into alignment to walk out like all the things. And the Father's so good to not reveal all those things at once, because I'd be overwhelmed and probably crawl in a hole and cry, to just be like, I can never become like him. He's so good. He's so holy. And like, look at all this flesh that's still here. But instead it's like, he's so good to like reveal things little by little and just be like, hey, you know, like how you're spending your time right now and what you're like giving yourself to. Let's get this into alignment, because I want you to look more like my son. And this is what he's doing in my life right now. And in the people that you're discipling and in your kids, it might be all different things right now. And so that's why I think it's so important, like that we see our job as parents or as employees, students, whatever it is, your first job is like to go and make disciples. So if I'm parenting my kids, my goal isn't just to make good kids who are going to be successful and have happy lives where they're married with a good job and have enough money they don't have to worry about anything. My goal is to like help them to become like Jesus, that they know how to follow him, that they know how to hear his voice. And part of that is like showing them this process of how to deal with things that aren't in alignment. And by speaking out the truth, this is who you are. Come back here. Like, okay, these things that like kind of keep getting you off, like let's put some boundaries in place for a bit to help you start moving in the right direction. Anyway, I hope that that's helpful. But I think that like in identity, one of the biggest hang-ups is how we speak. And the truth is things can be like in us that aren't our true identity, right? I can say it is true that I struggle with fear of this, or this. And that's not who Jesus is. So I can see those things and to just be like, but I'm trying to become like you, God. So like, show me where I'm off and like remind me of who I really am, like who you are, and like help me to become like you, Jesus. So that wraps up our thing on identity for today. Again, like I said, there's so much. I think you could talk and talk and talk, and I don't know much at all. And I'm sure that there's so many amazing teachings out there on identity, but this is what the Lord's placed on my heart, is this thing of alignment, and speaking life with our words instead of death, speaking out the truth of who God has created us and others to be, to remind ourselves and get back on the path where Jesus is the focus of what we're going after. So I just want to pray to close us. So Father, I thank you so much that you have given us this opportunity to make disciples, that somehow you believe that that we're capable of being like you and helping others to be like you, God, that you've entrusted us with this beautiful task. So I thank you for it, and I ask that you would help us to guard our tongues and what we're speaking, that you guard our minds and what we're believing, God, that at first that we would start thinking rightly, that we would see situations when we catch ourselves, and I think you know what I mean, when you catch yourself and you're like, I'm so frustrated right now, that you'd be like, wait, that is not a fruit of the Spirit. God, show me what you are doing in this. God, show me who this person is. God, show me how to see this situation rightly, and help me to guide it to be back where you have called us to be, God, in your paths and walking in your way of righteousness. So I ask, God, that you would give us eyes to see and ears to hear what you are doing, what you are speaking and saying over people, and that we would partner with heaven, that we partner with your heart and your truth in the words we speak and the thoughts we say, that we would see rightly and we'd align ourselves with your ways, God, and not the ways of our flesh and the things that the enemy wants us to believe are true. I thank you and just praise you today, God, that we get to become like Jesus, that you have set him before us as an example, that you've shown us yourself through him. We just honor you and love you. Amen. Thank you for joining me today for Life in the Family, and I hope you guys have a blessed week.